White Corin tries to get a black woman fired, shocked when she's her new boss. A slender beam of late afternoon sunlight angled through the tall, polished windows of the Lambert and Price corporate lobby. Ebony Chambers paused there for a moment, shifting the weight of her leather tote from one shoulder to the other. She had just arrived for her first day as a senior project manager, a significant milestone in her career. The building was impossibly tall, a mirror-like testament to modern architecture in downtown Chicago. Gleaming floors reflected Ebony's modest heels, and her reflection stared back, anxiety dancing in her brown eyes. She offered herself a discreet nod of encouragement. This was a big step forward. She'd been recruited from a rival firm, a place she'd worked for years, but left after hitting too many invisible ceilings that seemed to have everything to do with politics and little to do with job performance. Her phone buzzed in her blazer pocket, reminding her she needed to get to the 18th floor for orientation. She felt an electrifying sense of possibility as she made her way toward the elevator. She was used to being the only black woman in her department, sometimes in the entire suite of offices, but this time she wanted the environment to be different. She didn't want to be the token hire. She wanted to be recognized for her skills. Ebony knew that in the corporate world, respect could be elusive if you didn't walk in with a certain kind of armor. For years, she had built that armor from tough experiences and quiet resilience. And now, at Lambert and Price, she wanted to do more than survive. She wanted to excel. She navigated the corridors with crisp efficiency, following the instructions from her phone. The 18th floor turned out to be a wide, open space with sunlight streaming in, dotted with modern cubicles and glass-walled offices. A young receptionist greeted her, smiling behind the front desk. "Hi, I'm Ebony Chambers," she said, her voice soft but confident. "I'm starting today as a senior project manager for the new product line. Could you point me toward the orientation room?" "Of course, Ms. Chambers," the receptionist responded, scanning her computer. "It's just down the hall on your right, conference room B, they're expecting you." Ebony smiled her thanks, walked to the designated conference room, and paused just outside the closed door. She inhaled, smoothed her hand over her hair, rechecked her blazer, then stepped inside. The hush of the climate-controlled room greeted her, along with 3 new hires already seated at the long wooden table. Their eyes flickered toward her, and Ebony offered a polite smile in return. She sat at the far end, near a projector that displayed the Lambert and Price emblem on the wall. She was early, so she waited, scanning the room's details. The large glass window gave a panoramic view of the city below, while the polished table and modern chairs suggested a firm that spared no expense on comfort or aesthetics. Moments later, the door swung open. In walked a woman Ebony immediately registered as an archetype she'd encountered often in her life. The crisp white blouse, the pointed stiletto heels, the posture of someone who believed the world should arrange itself for her convenience. Corin Barnes. She was a mid-level manager at Lambert and Price. Ebony had learned that much from the orientation materials. Ebony quickly stood to introduce herself, not wanting to appear rude. "Hello, I'm Ebony Chambers, new senior project manager," she said, extending a hand. Corin's expression flickered through surprise, confusion, then politeness, all within the span of a heartbeat. She took Ebony's hand, lips tightening in what might have passed for a polite smile, though Ebony couldn't help but notice Corin's eyes tracing Ebony's features, her hair, the color of her skin. "Corin Barnes," came the crisp introduction. "I'm in charge of onboarding new employees at your level before they move on to their respective departments. Welcome to Lambert and Price." The handshake ended, and Corin moved on to greet the other new hires. Ebony retook her seat, ignoring a slight sense of unease. She'd witnessed many variations of that look before, people who were taken aback to learn that Ebony held a position of significant responsibility or advanced credentials. She let it wash over her. There would be more pressing matters to concern herself with soon enough. When the orientation began, Corin launched into a meticulously rehearsed presentation, detailing the company's history and corporate values. Ebony listened, took notes, and tried to glean any insights that might help her adapt quickly. Despite the typical new hire pep talk, Ebony kept noticing Corin's eyes drifting back to her, as though appraising her every move, every gesture. It was subtle, but Ebony was used to subtle. She wrote it off as mild curiosity. After all, she was the only one in the room hired directly into a high-level role. Perhaps that alone drew attention. When the session ended, Corin approached Ebony specifically. So, Ebony, Senior Project Manager for the new product line. That's a big role straight away. We've had people work for years before stepping into something at that level. Ebony gave a courteous nod. I've been in product management for 8 years at and James, specifically leading cross-functional teams for product launches. Lambert and Price reached out to me because of my experience with brand expansions into international markets. Corinne's gaze flickered again, the corners of her lips tightening. Right. Well, I'm sure you'll have a steep learning curve here, but do come to me if you need anything. I'll be happy to clarify processes that might be unfamiliar. Her voice lingered on unfamiliar in a way that made Ebony bristle. She didn't let it show. Instead, she calmly answered, I appreciate that. I'll make sure to keep the lines of communication open. With that, Ebony gathered her things and left the orientation room, determined not to let Corinne's less-than-warm reception ruin the excitement of her first day. She had a quick meeting with the HR coordinator to finalize paperwork, and by lunchtime, she was sifting through departmental briefs in a temporary cubicle, trying to get a lay of the land. To Ebony's surprise, around 1 in the afternoon, Corinne popped into her cubicle. Settling in okay? I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable and have all the resources you need, Corinne said brightly. Ebony spun in her chair. I do, thank you. Everyone's been very helpful, she replied genuinely. She had, in fact, found the environment quite welcoming from the handful of people she'd met. Corinne nodded, but her gaze drifted to Ebony's desk, scanning the documents spread out in front of her. Product strategy reviews for Q2? That's advanced reading for day 1. I like to hit the ground running, Ebony said, hoping Corinne would respect her diligence. I think it's important to familiarize myself as much as possible before I meet the rest of my team. Certainly, Corinne responded, but she made no move to leave. Instead, she lingered, hands on her hips, eyes drifting across Ebony's personal items. A small framed photo of her mother, a motivational quote pinned to the cubicle wall. Well, if you need an overview that's less technical, I can send you a condensed version. Sometimes it's easier to start with the basics before diving into the complexities. Ebony mustered a patient smile, but inside, a small knot of irritation formed. I appreciate it, but I think I can handle the complexities. Corinne's face maintained a cordial mask, but Ebony detected a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. Still, Corinne offered a strained smile and finally departed, leaving Ebony with an odd sense of unease. It was only her first day, but she sensed something intangible in the air. Like so many times before, Ebony understood she would have to prove herself to someone determined to see her as less capable. She pushed those thoughts aside. The remainder of the day passed in a flurry of introductions and practicalities. She met some of the junior associates who would report to her, as well as her direct supervisor, a global operations director named James Price, who seemed friendly enough and asked her to join a brainstorming session later that week. As Ebony finally gathered her things to leave that evening, she spotted Corinne in the hallway, leaning into a conversation with another manager, tossing a glance her way. Ebony made an attempt to meet her eyes with a polite smile, but Corinne turned away sharply. Ebony shook it off, reminding herself that forging alliances in a new workplace took time, and not everyone would be an ally. The next day brought a swirl of new tasks. Ebony discovered that, while James Price was in charge of overall global strategy, day-to-day operations for the new product line fell largely under Ebony's purview. Part of her role was to ensure that cross-departmental communication flowed smoothly, meaning she would often work with managers from various divisions. Corinne, Ebony learned, managed a smaller group in marketing analytics. She was not Ebony's direct report, but not Ebony's boss either. They were essentially on parallel branches of the hierarchy, though Ebony's role encompassed multiple departments' input. It was a complicated structure, one Ebony knew would require diplomacy and skill to navigate. As Ebony settled into her second day, she experienced her first conflict. In mid-morning, she was scheduled to attend a meeting about brand messaging. When she arrived, Corinne was already there, speaking to 2 colleagues. The conversation halted abruptly when Ebony walked in. She felt the tension in the air, but politely took a seat. The meeting started with an open discussion of promotional ideas. Ebony, having spent the previous night studying the product line and its target demographics, offered some insights that the team greeted with enthusiasm. Halfway through Ebony's explanation of a digital marketing strategy, Corinne interrupted. Ebony, you're new, so you might not be aware that Lambert and Price has a distinctly conservative brand identity. We typically prefer not to align with certain social media influencers. It might appear too edgy or brand dilutive. Ebony's shoulders stiffened, but she answered calmly. I understand the brand identity. The suggestions I'm making are aligned with the data on consumer trends. We're trying to reach a broader market, and these influencers already resonate with that demographic. Of course, we can refine the approach, but that's my recommendation after looking at the analytics. Corinne let out a small, dismissive laugh. That's an interesting take, but it doesn't sound like the Lambert and Price approach. The room fell silent for a beat, and Ebony noticed that the other staff members glanced at each other. There was an unspoken tension. Corinne's approach was borderline condescending. Ebony inhaled deeply. She knew the data was on her side, and she also understood corporate culture well enough to know that confidence was crucial. I respect your perspective, Corinne, Ebony said, her tone measured. But let's not dismiss data-driven strategies outright. Why don't we test them on a smaller scale? That way, we can see if the results align with brand identity and ROI. Corinne pursed her lips. We'll see, she said curtly, then changed the subject without further of Ebony's points. When the meeting ended, a couple of Ebony's colleagues discreetly approached her, praising her ideas and offering an unspoken solidarity that suggested Corinne was notoriously difficult. Ebony appreciated their kindness, but frustration simmered in her chest. This was only day 2, and already Corinne seemed determined to push back on anything Ebony proposed. Ebony wondered if it was personal or if Corinne was equally bristly with everyone else. She suspected it might be personal. The microaggressions, like implying Ebony wouldn't understand, the Lambert and Price approach carried a subtle sting. Ebony left the meeting determined not to be cowed. Over the next week, Ebony threw herself into her new role wholeheartedly. She built relationships with her team, set up one-on-ones, learned about each person's strengths, and began mapping out a project timeline for the new product line. The environment at Lambert and Price was fast-paced, and Ebony enjoyed the dynamic. She thrived when juggling multiple tasks. With every success she racked up, like discovering a potential supply chain improvement or smoothing out a conflict between departments, she couldn't help but notice Corinne's demeanor growing cooler. It was as though Corinne found Ebony's competence an affront. On Friday of that first week, Ebony was invited to a small dinner gathering organized by some of the mid-level managers in the marketing department. She wasn't entirely sure if she wanted to socialize after such a tense week, but she also knew forging bonds could be helpful. When she arrived at the trendy Italian bistro, she noticed Corinne in attendance, perched at the end of a high table, a half-empty glass of wine in her hand. The moment Ebony walked in, Corinne's smile faded into a tight-lipped expression. Ebony nearly turned around and left, but a friendlier manager waved her over with a welcoming grin. Ebony joined the group, introduced herself more casually to a few people she'd only seen in passing, and tried to enjoy the lively conversation. The meal was family-style, large plates of pasta and appetizers passed around. Ebony joined in the chatter, sharing a bit about her background, how she had grown up in a small town outside Atlanta, worked her way through college, and eventually gained a scholarship for her MBA. She had a quick sense of humor when she felt comfortable, and a few people laughed appreciatively at her anecdotes about comedic missteps in her early career. Corinne, however, contributed only the occasional pointed remark, mostly directed at Ebony, like, "Oh, that's certainly a big leap from a small-town background," or, "I suppose it's impressive you managed an MBA so young, Ebony." Ebony tried to let them slide, but her patience wore thin. By the time dessert came out, Ebony's cheeks burned from forcing a polite smile all evening. She was grateful when changed the subject to weekend plans. Ebony excused herself soon after, citing an early start on Monday, and headed out into the crisp evening air. Under the moonlit Chicago skyline, Ebony walked to her car and sighed. She'd only been here a week, yet the friction with Corinne felt like it had been building for months. Ebony wondered if she was imagining the slight hostility, but deep down, she knew it was real. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of work. Ebony's days were long, filled with back-to-back meetings. She made quick progress with her team, culminating in a thorough project plan for the product launch. Her direct boss, James Price, was pleased and gave her a glowing performance review for her first month. Ebony sensed she was finding her stride. Yet in nearly every meeting with Corinne, Ebony felt that same undercurrent of tension. Corinne would challenge her in front of others, question Ebony's decisions, or casually imply Ebony was new and needed more guidance. Ebony responded with professionalism and grace each time, never allowing Corin's digs to pull her into unprofessional behavior. She stayed calm, presented facts, and insisted on collaborative solutions. However, Ebony soon began hearing whispers from other departments that Corin was complaining about her behind the scenes, accusing Ebony of not following protocol or bypassing Corin's authority. Though Ebony outranked Corin in certain aspects, the corporate structure was complex enough that Corin could claim Ebony was stepping on her toes. Ebony confronted Corin directly at one point, suggesting they set up a regular sync to improve communication. Corin agreed, but the weekly syncs turned into tense, mandatory standoffs. Corin would arrive with a list of petty grievances, like Ebony scheduling a meeting without copying her on the email, or Ebony approaching someone in the marketing department directly, bypassing Corin's manager role. Meanwhile, Ebony discovered that Corin wasn't a top performer. People complained that Corin rarely carried her weight or truly contributed to solutions. Instead, she specialized in complaining about problems and placing blame on others. Ebony recognized the type, someone whose career advanced by making sure everyone else looked incompetent or rebellious. Ebony was determined not to let that sabotage her own trajectory. The tipping point came one Monday morning when Ebony noticed she couldn't log into a key system for product management data. She tried her password again, carefully. Access. Confused, she contacted it, only to learn that her account had been flagged for suspicious activity and locked pending an investigation. Alarmed, Ebony asked for details. The IT rep explained that a manager had submitted a request saying Ebony was improperly accessing private data. Ebony's heart pounded. She knew she was authorized to access any data related to her product line. Who submitted the request? Ebony asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. Corin Barnes, the IT rep said quietly. She cited a policy violation. We're still investigating. In the meantime, your account is locked. Ebony thanked the rep, ended the call, and stood in a cold sweat. This was beyond petty sabotage. This was an outright attack on Ebony's ability to do her job. Furious, she marched down the hall toward Corin's office, but as she approached, she caught sight of Corin standing near a row of filing cabinets, speaking with her. They looked uncomfortable. Corin's voice was pitched loud enough that Ebony caught snippets of her words. Isn't even following the most basic rules. I had to report it, obviously. We can't have that kind of disregard for protocols. Ebony's temper flared. She didn't like confrontations in public, so she pivoted, returning to her desk to calm down and strategize. Next, Ebony wrote an email to James Price, explaining that her access was revoked based on a presumably false claim, and that she needed immediate assistance to rectify the situation. She also requested a meeting with the HR department to clarify the policies, making it clear she had not violated any. By the end of the day, Ebony had scheduled a meeting with James and an HR representative to get to the bottom of it. Corin's accusations fell apart the moment Ebony presented documentation of her access rights, which were clearly stated in her contract. HR scolded Corin for failing to verify Ebony's permission level before filing a complaint. Corin put on an innocent face and insisted there must have been a misunderstanding. I just wanted to protect the company, she said. I didn't realize Ebony had such broad clearance. James gave Ebony an apologetic nod. We'll expedite restoring your account access, Ebony. Corin, next time, you should verify with me or Ebony directly before filing such a request. Still, Ebony could sense Corin was nowhere near apologetic. Her eyes revealed a simmering resentment. Ebony held her head high, knowing that at least on an official level she had been vindicated. But she also recognized the writing on the wall. Corin was going to keep trying to undermine her. In the weeks that followed, Ebony found herself repeatedly cleaning up Corin's messes. On more than one occasion, Ebony discovered that Corin had forgotten to forward essential client feedback or had some crucial piece of data relevant to Ebony's product strategy. Each time Ebony had to intervene, she found the root cause traced back to Corin's carelessness, or more likely intentional sabotage. Ebony documented everything, ensuring she had records. She'd learned from experience never to let sabotage go unrecorded. Yet Ebony tried to maintain a spirit of fairness. She always approached Corin politely, requesting updated information or clarifications. She never publicly disparaged Corin. Unfortunately, that courtesy wasn't reciprocated. Ebony overheard Corin in the break room, weaving negative narratives about Ebony to anyone who would listen, complaining that Ebony was too aggressive, that she was forcing changes on the department, that she didn't respect the company's culture. Despite all this, Ebony's performance shone. She led the product development meetings with clarity and confidence. She made key contributions that saved the company money by identifying a more cost-effective manufacturing partner. Everyone, including the higher-ups, seemed impressed with Ebony's work, and Ebony noticed a quiet respect growing among her team. They saw how she deflected Corin's negativity with professionalism. Some confided in Ebony privately about struggles they'd had with Corin. A junior associate told Ebony, "I think she's threatened by you. She's used to pushing people around, but you're not letting her get away with it." Ebony nodded sadly, aware that she was dealing with a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior. She tried to keep her head down, focusing on the tasks that truly mattered. Yet she couldn't deny the emotional toll. In the evenings, she returned to her apartment feeling drained. She'd vent to her mother over the phone, or sometimes to her best friend, who lived across the city. "I just don't get why people have to act this way," Ebony would say. "We're all supposed to be working toward the same goals." Her mother, a retired school teacher, would reply in a calming tone, "Sometimes, baby, it's easier for folks to tear others down than to build themselves up. You remember you deserve this position, and don't let her make you doubt yourself." Ebony took those words to heart. Midway through her second month, Ebony learned that her boss, James, was taking a temporary leave for family reasons. The news spread quickly. He would be gone for at least 4 weeks. In his absence, Ebony was told to report directly to the next person in the chain of command, the Vice President of Global Operations, who was traveling frequently. As a result, Ebony had more autonomy than ever. She was effectively running the day-to-day of the new product line with minimal oversight. Corin, on the other hand, seemed to interpret James's absence as a prime opportunity to escalate her antagonism. With James out of the picture, Ebony received an unrelenting barrage of demands from Corin. "We need your data for analytics by 5 p.m. today." Or, "I need you to sign off on these marketing briefs." Ebony noticed that Corin was circumventing the established protocol, emailing Ebony's subordinates directly with tasks or instructions meant for Ebony. Ebony guessed Corin was trying to cause confusion or create a paper trail that might suggest Ebony was ignoring deadlines. Undeterred, Ebony meticulously responded to each email, the relevant parties, clarifying responsibilities and timelines. She was too seasoned to be tripped up by these games, but it was exhausting. At one point, Ebony considered going to HR again, but she knew that constant complaints could backfire, especially if the upper management believed Ebony was being overly sensitive or unable to handle internal conflict. She weighed her options, deciding to gather more evidence of Corin's behavior. A culminating incident came shortly before James was due to return. Ebony was leading a high-stakes meeting with a key supplier over video conference. The meeting had been planned for weeks, and Ebony's careful preparation showed. Her slides were polished, the data flawless. The supplier's representatives seemed impressed and ready to finalize negotiations. Just as Ebony began the final summary, the conference room door burst open. Corin strode in, face flushed, an ominous folder clutched in her hands. "Excuse me," Corin said, not bothering to modulate her voice. Ebony's eyes widened. She forced a polite smile, gesturing for Corin to wait until the video call ended. But Corin approached the table, set the folder down, and opened it in front of Ebony. On top was a printout of an internal email thread. Ebony frowned, trying to read it discreetly while also not ignoring the supplier on the conference screen. Corin cleared her throat dramatically. "I need Ebony to clarify these serious discrepancies about the cost projections." Ebony felt her cheeks burn. The supplier reps, obviously taken aback by the interruption, glanced at each other in confusion. Ebony's voice wavered slightly as she tried to maintain composure. "Corin, I'm in the middle of a meeting with the suppliers." "This can wait." Corin pressed on, ignoring the presence of the remote attendees. "Actually, it can't. If Ebony has been inflating cost savings, we could be making decisions based on incorrect data." Ebony's heart raced. She realized that Corin was essentially accusing her of misreporting cost data in front of an external partner, a direct shot at Ebony's credibility. Summoning every ounce of self-control, Ebony managed to say calmly, "Corin, these figures are based on updated quotes from the manufacturing partner. They're accurate and, If you have questions, I'd be happy to discuss them offline, as we originally scheduled. Right now, we need to maintain a professional front with the supplier. The supplier's reps looked uncomfortable, but Ebony pivoted the conversation swiftly, continuing to finalize the discussion. She ended the call with a polite flourish, ignoring the icy tension radiating from Corin, who stood impatiently by the table. Once the video conference concluded, Ebony closed her laptop with deliberate calm. Corin, that was a critical meeting. Why would you interrupt like that and bring unfounded allegations in front of an external partner? Corin crossed her arms. Unfounded. I've been hearing from certain sources that your cost projections might be overly optimistic. I needed to ensure the supplier wasn't being misled. Sources? Which sources? Ebony demanded, her voice still controlled but brimming with underlying anger. All data for this project is stored on the shared drive, accessible to you as well. I can show you every number, every calculation. This is no secret. Corin shrugged, unrepentant. I'm just doing my due diligence. Ebony stared at her for a long, tense moment. It was evident Corin's goal was to shake Ebony's credibility in front of the supplier, and possibly get Ebony fired if it turned into a real scandal. But Ebony knew her data was solid, and she also knew that she had the records and sign-offs to prove it. Without another word, Ebony gathered her papers and left the conference room, her pulse pounding in her ears. She headed straight to HR, passing by the wide-eyed stares of coworkers who had likely overheard the confrontation through the glass walls. That evening, Ebony sank into her couch, exhausted. She wanted to cry with frustration, but she fought back tears. She had worked so hard, and it seemed so unfair to deal with constant sabotage. She reached out to a close friend who was a lawyer just to understand her options if Corin's behavior escalated further. The friend advised Ebony to document everything meticulously: dates, times, the nature of the complaints, and any false allegations. Ebony was already doing so, but she redoubled her efforts. She also resolved to speak with James Price the moment he returned. James did return, a few days later, looking weary from his family emergency but ready to dive back into work. Within hours of his return, Ebony requested a private meeting. She laid out her evidence: the spurious complaints, the interruptions, the sabotage attempts, including that brazen interruption with the supplier. James listened, his face growing dark with concern. "This is unacceptable," he said finally. "I'm sorry you've had to deal with this, Ebony. Corin has a reputation for being difficult, but this is beyond the pale. I'll speak with her and HR." Ebony nodded, feeling a swirl of relief. "I appreciate that, James. I just want to focus on my work and do the best job possible." Over the next week, Ebony noticed Corin's hostility transform from overt to more covert. Perhaps James had warned her off. Corin still gave Ebony the cold shoulder, but she stopped openly interfering, at least for the moment. Ebony focused on the upcoming major presentation to the executive board. She was determined to prove her team's worth, overshadowing any rumors Corin might be spreading. The day of the presentation arrived, and Ebony stood confidently before the conference room of senior executives, including the company's CEO, outlining the product's market potential and cost savings. The reaction was overwhelmingly positive. As Ebony wrapped up, the CEO himself complimented her thoroughly researched plan and the clarity of her delivery. Ebony felt a swell of pride. She glanced to the side and saw Corin standing near the door, arms folded. The expression on Corin's face was sour enough to curdle milk, but Ebony refused to let that dampen her achievement. After that meeting, Ebony's star soared within Lambert and Price. Word of her successes traveled fast. She gained more direct responsibilities, and senior executives began including her in strategy sessions that were typically reserved for higher echelons. Meanwhile, Corin's attempts to undermine Ebony seemed less frequent, though Ebony knew better than to fully relax. There was still a chill in Corin's interactions. One quiet Wednesday morning, Ebony heard from a colleague in HR that Corin had been asking questions about Ebony's background, her credentials, her references, her previous job. Ebony's chest tightened. She wondered if Corin was attempting to find something, anything, to discredit Ebony. But Ebony's record was clean. She had no reason to fear, yet the fact that Corin kept digging around was unsettling. That Friday, Ebony's phone buzzed with an email from Corin, titled Urgent, Employee Violation of Company Policy. Ebony felt her heart rate spike. She opened it, bracing herself for another baseless accusation. The email, to HR and James Price, claimed Ebony had violated the company's expense policy by booking a hotel upgrade on a recent business trip. Ebony's stomach twisted. She had indeed traveled to New York for a meeting, but had she upgraded the hotel on the company's dime? She specifically recalled that her original reservation had a glitch, and the hotel staff had moved her to another room at no extra charge. Ebony scanned her credit card statement and the receipts. Sure enough, there was no cost difference. Ebony realized this was just another orchestrated attempt by Corin to brand her as dishonest. Taking a steadying breath, Ebony methodically responded, attaching the relevant receipts and evidence that she had not incurred extra charges. "I did not violate any policy," Ebony concluded in the email. "The hotel upgraded the room at no additional cost to Lambert and Price. Attached are the documents confirming that." Within minutes, James replied, thanking Ebony for clarifying. There was no further reply from Corin. Once again, Ebony was proven innocent. At that point, Ebony decided enough was enough. She scheduled another sit-down with James, demanding something be done about Corin's vendetta. James heard her out and promised to escalate the matter. Ebony left the meeting feeling a small sense of hope. For once, she believed the company might step in and hold Corin accountable for her toxic behavior. But the very next morning, Ebony received a text from a friend in the department, warning her that Corin was overheard telling another manager that she was working on a formal complaint to get Ebony fired. Ebony's hands shook. On what grounds? Ebony typed back, responded that Corin claimed Ebony was creating a hostile work environment for her, ironically flipping the script of Ebony's actual experiences. Ebony's anger flared. This woman was relentless. "Let her file it," Ebony texted. "I have a mountain of proof of her harassment. I'll fight it." Days turned into a tense waiting game. Ebony continued performing her job as usual, though every email ping made her heart flutter. Was this the complaint? She tried to maintain her composure, focusing on the tasks that needed doing, keeping a professional facade for her team. In private, Ebony was deeply worried. Corin's tactics, though often baseless, could wear down anyone over time. Ebony feared that eventually something might stick, or that the stress would become unbearable. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, Ebony was called into an emergency meeting with HR. Her pulse hammered in her ears. She walked into the HR office, her notepad clutched tightly, half expecting Corin to be there brandishing a folder of accusations. Instead, she was greeted by a somber-faced HR director named Lucy and a second HR representative. Ebony sat, heart-pounding. Lucy cleared her throat. "Ebony, we've reviewed the allegations Corin Barnes filed. We want you to know we found no evidence to support them. In fact, many statements she made contradict direct evidence from multiple witnesses and documentation. We're closing the complaint as unfounded." Ebony released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Relief washed over her so forcefully, tears threatened to gather in her eyes. She swallowed them back. "Thank you, I'm relieved. Honestly, this has been an incredibly stressful situation." Lucy nodded, her expression empathetic. "We understand, and I'd like you to know we're escalating this matter further. Corin's pattern of behavior is unacceptable, and we take it very seriously. However, Ebony, there's another aspect we need to discuss." Lucy paused, glancing at the other HR rep, who nodded. "There have been some reorganizations at the executive level, and we're going to see some changes in management structures. The official announcement will be made soon, but we wanted you to be aware that your role may shift. Not in a demotion sense," Lucy clarified quickly, "but in a sense that your responsibilities could expand, and that might place you in a direct supervisory position over marketing analytics, which includes Corin's group." Ebony's eyes widened. I'm not sure I understand." Lucy leaned in. "The Vice President of Global Operations has recognized your leadership. With James Price stepping into a more global role, we're looking at reorganizing. You've demonstrated remarkable skill and resilience, especially under difficult circumstances. There's discussion about promoting you to a more comprehensive oversight role." Ebony's pulse raced, her mind spinning. "So, effectively, Corin would be reporting to me." Lucy nodded. "Yes, that's one of the proposals. We understand if this is uncomfortable given the history. We just want you to be aware that significant changes are coming." Ebony left the meeting feeling as if her world had flipped. She was being considered for a promotion that would place Corin, of all people, directly under her supervision. She felt a whirlwind of emotions: vindication, anxiety, disbelief. While it was everything Ebony had worked for, she also recognized the precariousness. This could lead to more hostility if Corinne's attitude remained the same. But Ebony also felt a new confidence. If she had the authority, she could ensure that Corinne's games stopped. Ebony reminded herself to keep calm and professional. She couldn't let Corinne's negativity consume her. In the days that followed, rumors of a major restructuring swirled through the halls. People whispered that Ebony was going to become a top-level manager, that James Price was moving into an executive position, and that Corinne's department would be rolled under Ebony's new purview. Meanwhile, Ebony tried to focus on her upcoming board presentation about the final product rollout. She saw Corinne in the hallway a few times, but Corinne didn't meet her gaze. Ebony suspected Corinne had heard the rumors, too. The official announcement arrived at the end of the month. An all-hands meeting was called in the large auditorium on the building's main floor. The CEO and other top executives stood on a stage, addressing the assembled employees. Ebony sat near the front, heart thumping. The CEO praised the success of certain departments, referencing improved performance in product development and expansions. Then he announced James Price's promotion to Senior Vice President of Global Strategy, drawing enthusiastic applause. James took the microphone, thanked everyone, and moved on to announce the new structure beneath him. And now, it is my pleasure to announce a new appointment as Director of Integrated Product and Marketing Operations, James said into the microphone. We wanted someone who embodies innovation, collaboration, and strong leadership. This person has shown remarkable skill in uniting departments, boosting efficiency, and leading complex product rollouts. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to our new director, Ebony Chambers. Thunderous applause filled the auditorium. Ebony's cheeks burned and she stood on shaky legs, walking up to the stage. She took the microphone with a mixture of humility and pride. Thank you, she managed, her voice trembling slightly. I'm honored to take on this role, and I look forward to continuing to build a collaborative environment here at Lambert and Price. She kept her words brief, scanning the crowd. Her eyes landed on Corinne, standing off to the side, a stunned expression on her face, as though she couldn't quite believe what she was witnessing. After the meeting, there was a whirlwind of congratulations. Hugged Ebony, exclaiming how proud she was. Other managers came up to shake Ebony's hand. Eventually, Ebony spotted Corinne in the corner, scowling. As Ebony approached, Corinne pressed her lips together in what appeared to be a forced smile. Congratulations, Corinne said, her voice taut. I heard the news, quite the jump in such a short time. Ebony maintained a measured tone. Thank you, Corinne. I'm looking forward to working more closely with your team now. I hope we can have a fresh start. She extended her hand, giving Corinne an opportunity to mend fences. Corinne hesitated, eyes flickering. She was clearly wrestling with her emotions, perhaps realizing that Ebony was now her boss. After a moment, Corinne reached out and shook Ebony's hand, though her smile was anemically polite. I suppose so, Corinne said. I'm sure you'll want to review our current projects soon. Ebony nodded, determined to maintain professional courtesy even if Corinne wouldn't. Yes, I'll schedule a meeting for us to discuss next steps. Let's keep everything transparent and constructive. Corinne nodded stiffly, then excused herself. Ebony watched her go, feeling a mix of relief and trepidation. She had the position, the authority, but she didn't relish any vengeance or humbling of Corinne. She wanted to run a healthy department, free from sabotage and personal vendettas. Over the next few weeks, Ebony stepped into her new role with an unyielding sense of responsibility. She led a series of transition meetings, clarifying how marketing analytics would integrate with product development under her leadership. Corinne had no choice but to attend these meetings. At first, she remained conspicuously silent, arms crossed. Eventually, Ebony tried to engage her, encouraging her to present her team's data and proposals. Corinne, but there was a begrudging edge to her participation. One afternoon, Ebony scheduled a one-on-one meeting with Corinne in Ebony's new office. It was a spacious room on the 21st floor, with large windows overlooking the cityscape. Corinne arrived, looking guarded. Ebony invited her to sit. So, Corinne, Ebony began gently. We've had a tumultuous history. I'm hoping we can turn over a new leaf. I want you to succeed in this department. I'm willing to put the past behind us if you are. Corinne looked at Ebony with an expression that wavered between disbelief and resentment. You want me to succeed? Yes, Ebony said firmly. Every person on this team has potential. My job is to guide that potential. I'm offering my support and an open line of communication. If you have concerns or ideas, I'm here to listen. Corinne swallowed hard. She looked down at her hands clasped in her lap. For a moment she seemed close to tears. Ebony braced herself, unsure what reaction would come. Finally, Corinne's voice cracked slightly. I apologize, she whispered, surprising Ebony with the admission. Corinne blinked rapidly, her gaze darting to the window. I was wrong. I don't know. I thought you were stepping on my territory, and I... Ebony listened, letting Corinne speak. I appreciate you saying that, Ebony replied softly when Corinne paused. I know it can be challenging when new roles shift the hierarchy. But if we want to be successful, we need to trust each other, or at least try. Corinne closed her eyes momentarily. Then, in a strained voice, she said, I was afraid you'd make me look incompetent and that I wouldn't get anywhere in this company. Ebony nodded sympathetically. Corinne, you can still thrive here. The question is whether you're willing to focus on growth rather than sabotage. I'm not here to block your career path. I'm here to lead a department to success. Corinne inhaled shakily. She nodded, though Ebony couldn't read the sincerity in her eyes. I'll do my best to cooperate, Corinne said. For a moment, Ebony felt genuine hope. Maybe Corinne would turn herself around. The conversation ended on that tentative note. Ebony didn't fully trust Corinne's abrupt change of heart, but it felt like progress, a glimmer of possibility that Corinne might, at least outwardly, stop her campaign to sabotage Ebony. In the following days, Ebony saw a slight shift. Corinne became more reserved, less openly combative. She contributed to meetings in a civil manner and with deadlines. While Ebony suspected Corinne was still swallowing bitterness, there were no further sabotage attempts. Instead, Corinne appeared somewhat subdued, as though the realization that Ebony was now her boss had deflated her ego. Ebony chose not to gloat or even show any sign of triumph. She continued treating Corinne with professional respect. Word spread quickly that the new director, Ebony, had handled a difficult employee with composure. Morale in the integrated department rose, especially among those who had suffered Corinne's bristly behavior for years. And though Ebony was still cautious, she felt more at ease coming to work, free from the dread of being by false accusations. A few weeks into her directorship, Ebony was in her office late on a Thursday, finalizing a report for James Price. She heard a timid knock at the open door. Looking up, she saw Corinne standing there, shoulders tense. Yes, Corinne. Ebony said warmly, Come on in, everything okay? Corinne walked in and set a folder on Ebony's desk. I've updated the marketing analytics for Q4. Thought you might want it before tomorrow's meeting. Ebony thanked her and flipped through the folder, impressed by the thoroughness of the data. She glanced up at Corinne, about to commend her effort, when Corinne spoke again, eyes lowered. Ebony, I just wanted to say, I know an apology doesn't erase everything, but I really am sorry for the trouble I caused you. It was personal and it shouldn't have been. Ebony's heart softened. I accept your apology, thank you. Let's keep working well together from now on. Corinne managed a faint smile and nodded. Ebony smiled back, feeling a sense of relief that maybe Corinne was genuinely turning over a new leaf. After Corinne left, Ebony sat quietly, reflecting on the journey from that first day when Corinne tried to sabotage her at every turn, to now when Ebony's leadership position had revealed an unexpected shift in dynamics. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair, gazing out at the city lights. This moment, this outcome, was proof that perseverance and integrity could, eventually, triumph over pettiness and prejudice. Looking back, Ebony recalled the initial humiliations and attempts to undermine her competence. She remembered the days she felt like quitting, the nights she spent questioning her own resolve. Yet here she was, recognized for her skill, leading a department to success, and earning begrudging respect, even from someone like Corinne. Ebony recognized that the moral heart of her story was about holding one's head high amid adversity, never allowing another person's doubts or hatred to define your worth. In a world where people are quick to judge based on surface differences, race, background, or assumptions of inferiority, Ebony had refused to be caged by those limitations. And ultimately, her values, her patience, and her unwavering sense of dignity had brought her a hard-won victory. Days turned into weeks, and Ebony's leadership style began to reshape the department culture. She implemented transparent processes for collaboration, encouraged open communication, and recognized team members for their contributions. Under her direction, the new product line soared, garnering praise from both internal stakeholders and the target market. Each day felt a little brighter, as if the tension that once gripped the office was finally loosening. Corin, to Ebony's surprise, became a relatively cooperative subordinate. She attended meetings on time, met her deliverables, and even offered some valuable insights during strategy sessions. Though their relationship remained cordial rather than friendly, the hostility seemed to dissolve. Occasionally, Ebony caught Corin studying her with an odd mixture of curiosity and respect. Ebony suspected Corin might be coming to terms with her own biases. One afternoon, after a particularly successful product rollout, Ebony found a note on her desk. It read, "Thank you for not giving up on this team and for treating me fairly despite my actions. I respect your leadership. Corin." Ebony sat holding the note for a moment, feeling a swirl of emotions. She didn't expect a complete transformation, but this gesture was a small piece of evidence that Corin had recognized Ebony's humanity and skill. In the end, Ebony's story served as a powerful reminder. Sometimes, the very people who try to destroy you end up witnessing your triumph. And in that triumph, there's an opportunity for both personal growth and a chance to dismantle the biases that spark such conflicts in the first place. Ebony understood that Corin had once tried to get her fired, to tarnish her reputation, to push her out. Yet, through fate and perseverance, Ebony became Corin's boss, and the outcome of that twist was more than just a moment of poetic justice. It was an affirmation that genuine talent and integrity don't need to crush others in return. Rather, they can elevate a workplace and foster change. Ebony found herself humbled by how the journey had turned out. She didn't gloat or use her authority to exact revenge. Instead, she used the moment to create a better department, one that operated without the weight of petty sabotage and racism. Corin, shocked to discover Ebony was her new boss, learned a lesson about her preconceived notions and the consequences of underestimating someone based on superficial judgments. And Ebony, for her part, discovered that rising above hostility didn't mean ignoring it, but confronting it with a balance of evidence, dignity, and unwavering self-respect. Late one evening, long after most employees had gone home, Ebony sat alone in her office, reviewing the final numbers on a new distribution deal. The city lights sparkled through the window. She shut off her computer, leaned back in her chair, and allowed herself a quiet moment of pride. She'd traveled such a long road to reach this point, enduring the indignities of prejudice, the frustrations of sabotage, and the emotional toll of proving herself again and again. Now, with the echoes of footsteps in deserted hallways, Ebony recognized that her success wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who had been doubted or underestimated because of who they were. In that still, reflective moment, she thought of the moral woven through her entire experience. The strongest way to overcome cruelty or bigotry is to persist in excellence, to remain open-hearted even when others try to break your spirit, and to recognize that justice sometimes arrives in unexpected ways. The next morning, Ebony would come back, as she did every day, not just as a boss, but as a leader determined to shape a culture of respect and possibility. And that, she knew, was the greatest victory of all.